Welcome to the Scottish Rite Journal podcast, an audio presentation of the Scottish Rite Journal, brought to you by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction, Mother Supreme Council of the World. This week's article is The Masonic Themes of Science Fiction Writer Robert A. Heinlein by John M. Bozeman, Ph.D., and comes from the September-October 2023 issue of the Scottish Rite Journal. Introduction. Robert A. Heinlein is one of the big three of science fiction in the mid-20th century. Heinlein, along with Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov, emerged as leading writers during science fiction's golden age, roughly 1938 to 1959. Golden Age science fiction was generally optimistic about the future and inspired many young men and women to pursue careers in science and technology. Of the big three, Heinlein was known for his compelling characterizations and commitment to scientific accuracy. As Dr. John Bozeman explains in the following article, Heinlein also includes Masonic elements in a number of his works. Growing up, I developed an early love of science fiction and fantasy. One of the first works I read was Robert Heinlein's youth-oriented Have Space Suit, Will Travel, 1958. A story in which a young man accidentally is kidnapped by hostile aliens. Working with his fellow captives, he foils an invasion of the Earth. By the time I finished this imaginative work, I knew that I loved science fiction. I continued reading Heinlein, including Space Cadet, 1948. Here, Iowa teenager Matt Dotson joins the Interplanetary Patrol, an elite organization dedicated to peacekeeping. Matt first acquires self-mastery by learning to work as part of a team filled with strong personalities. Later, he learns to work for the greater good when his team is forced to act as impromptu ambassadors to Venus. Matt's integrity and good character help him avert an Earth-Venus war. The book also contains a Scottish Rite reference. After the Venus adventure, the young men are debriefed by their commander. One of Matt's fellow cadets summarizes the experience by saying, "It was as if the commander were 32nd degree and we were 1st degree, but members of the same lodge." Space Cadet later inspired the Tom Corbett Space Cadet series of books, television, and radio shows, as well as comic books that were vastly popular in the 1950s. After finishing all 12 of Heinlein's young adult novels, I moved on to enjoy his adult-focused works. I soon found out that I was not alone in my high regard for his stories. His books had won some of the top awards in science fiction. 4 Hugo Awards for his works Double Star, 1956, Starship Troopers, 1959, Stranger in a Strange Land, 1961, and my personal favorite, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, 1966. Most of his works remain in print today, decades after they first appeared. As we see with Space Cadet, Heinlein periodically included Masons and Masonic concepts in his works. The most extensive example of this is a novella from early in his writing career, If This Goes On, 1940. In the story, the U.S. has been overtaken by a tyrannical religious dictatorship led by the prophet incarnate. John Lyle, an earnest but naive palace guard, falls in love with the equally naive Judith. Shocked at the corruption in the palace and aided by a few decent but more worldly friends, the couple attempt to flee, but their escape goes awry. They join the Cabal, an underground organization of lovers of freedom working to overthrow the prophet. The Cabal, which would seem to be a stand-in for the Masonic order as a bastion of religious tolerance, uses Masonic customs and imagery extensively. For example, when the fugitives first pledge loyalty to the group, John is questioned as a Mason might be upon entering the portals of the lodge. Is he there of his own free will and accord? He is then blindfolded and given a series of questions, of which John remembers only such snatches as inquiring if he was a man freeborn, of good repute, and well recommended. The Cabal eventually allows John to proceed further into the initiation process, closing with a prayer with Masonic phrasings, such as, "Vouchsafe thine aid, Almighty Father of the universe," and the closing, "So mote it be." Later on in the story, John uses, but does not describe, the grand hailing sign of distress to alert his fellow Kabbalists when he is abducted by the prophet's henchmen. Based on these and other descriptions of the Cabal and its rituals, one anonymous author from the Grand Lodge of British Columbia and Yukon suggests that Heinlein may have used an anti-Masonic expose as a source. However, we know that Heinlein had at least some direct exposure to Masonry, and in his other works, he generally treats Masonry briefly, but in a favorable manner or, especially when referring to Shriners, a light-hearted but friendly manner. My own suspicion is that Heinlein's passion for independence of mind and spirit, coupled with his deep concern about the totalitarian movements that he saw expanding in 1939 Europe, may have led him to overshare his own knowledge of the craft as he created the fictional world of If This Goes On. This leads us to a final question. Was Heinlein a Freemason? For many notable figures, the answer is we are not sure. In Heinlein's case, however, the answer is that likely he was not. Brother Jonathan M. Jacobs, 32nd degree, investigated this question in 1990 and concluded that Heinlein was not a member of either the Scottish Rite Northern Masonic nor Southern jurisdictions. Nor was he affiliated with the Grand Lodges of any of the states he called home: Missouri, Maryland, New York, Colorado, or California. Further, in 1986, Brother Sam Gerber of Auburn, Maine, wrote to Robert Heinlein in 1986 directly asking if he was a Shriner. Heinlein was ill at the time. His wife, Virginia Heinlein, responded on his behalf, stating that her husband was not a Mason, let alone a Shriner. Later, as a widow, Mrs. Heinlein in February 2000 told a Heinlein biographer that her husband had become interested in Freemasonry through a friend he knew during his college years at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. Unfortunately, Heinlein was then struggling financially and could not afford the initiation fee. By the time his financial situation improved, he appeared to have lost interest. Although likely not a Mason, Robert A. Heinlein included Masonic characters and themes, sometimes comical, but more often serious, in his fictional works. His stories extol the virtues of honesty, civic virtue, self-reliance, self-cultivation, and respect for others. While he usually preferred to make these points indirectly through the characters and events in his stories and novels, on rare occasions he would speak about these values more directly. One of these was a spoken essay for legendary journalist Edward R. Murrow's radio show, This I Believe, broadcast in 1952, which clearly shows his commitment to values both Masonic and humanitarian. I believe in the honest craft of workmen. Impressive monuments and marvels of the builder's ingenuity, he goes on, were built level and square by craftsmen who were honest in their bones. These values, along with courage, curiosity, and decency, will one day take humans to the stars and beyond. Like and share this article, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you wish to comment, please leave one, and as a reminder, hit the notifications bell. Any accompanying photographs or citations for this article can be found in the corresponding print edition. The Scottish Rite Journal is published by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction, Mother Supreme Council of the World. Mark Dreisenstock, 32nd degree, KCCH, Managing Editor. I'm your host, Matt Bowers.